All right, we'll give it a few more seconds for the stragglers to get in. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for the Exit Advisors Weekly Town Hall series that focuses on small, medium-sized businesses and ways that we can help them. Today, we've got Jason Knight again, who's going to be focusing on kind of a continuation of EOS and what it is and how you implement it into your business. And he's going to be focusing on integrating accountability into your business. Before we kick off, I'll give the typical Exit Advisors overview, but then I want to dive into three important points about trust, experience, and collaboration. Exit Advisors, as you know, is a Houston-based M&A advisory firm, and we work with entrepreneurs, small businesses around their transactions. And those 3 points that I wanted to highlight are so important to this process because you have to build trust. As a business owner, the majority of your wealth is probably tied up into your business. And when you have some kind of transaction, whether it's a sale, an unexpected knock on the door, unfortunately, as we like to call it, the hit by bus strategy, where you're, building a succession plan to pass it on to your family, it will be the most significant transaction of your life. There's no margin for error and you don't get second chances. So it is absolutely paramount that you do it correctly the first time. And that's why we have our team. Al and Gary, the two managing partners, are serial entrepreneurs, and the rest of our team, most importantly, have lived and breathed this from both sides of the table. Al and Gary have owned businesses. Al has sold to private equity. Gary has built multiple practices up and sold them and has tons of accounting experience. John Maneri, one of our partners, was a former client of ours. He built a business from scratch and sold it to Sylvania, one of the world's largest industrial lighting groups. And Casey and myself, Casey's been doing this with Al for a decade or more. And, I've got experience with banking and working with early stage investments. So it is absolutely crucial that you have a team that knows how to do this. But I think one of the real important points here is that we don't just coach and teach this. We've lived and breathed it from both sides of the table as business owners and as advisors. The other point that I want to talk about is collaboration. We are an integral part of the transaction, as you know, but we surround ourselves with the absolute best experts in the industry, and that goes into building trust. So you have to surround yourself with the absolute best in order to do these transactions correctly. And that's why we create, the exit team and the deal team, and we partner with people that we're going to integrate into your transaction, or hopefully before so, like Jason's going to be doing before you're looking to sell, so that we can do as much cleanup and prep work to increase the value of your business, streamline your operations, and ultimately get you to a successful closing. As you see here, it's a very collaborative team. There's a lot of different facets and moving parts. And so we really pride ourselves on education. We invite you, if you're a business owner, take 15, 20 minutes, give us a call. It doesn't cost you anything. We don't charge. We like to educate you on our process. That would be the best time you could possibly spend for free to learn, where are you, what's your current state, and what are you looking to do? It's no strings attached, and, you have to start now. It's really not a good idea to just wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to sell my business and I want to do it now. You really have to start thinking about this stuff way ahead of time. And the last point about the whole collaborative approach is our referral partnership. We're a lean firm, as you can see, 5 individuals, and we partner with the best of the best in the industry who specialize in these different areas, as you can see here on the exit team. And one of the benefits to that is if you know or have a business that you're willing to bring to the table, you get to participate in our deals to the tune of roughly 10% of is what we set aside as an origination fee. And I've been in banking for prior to this 7 years and know the industry well. I don't know a single other group personally that allows an external group to participate at that level. So you really get plugged in to what we're doing and you get to participate. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox. I want to introduce Jason. Jason's going to continue teaching us EOS, which is one of these integral pieces that we need to build and prepare your business for exit and make sure it's all clean and ready to go.
Awesome.
So I'm going to pass it over to you.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Andrew. Let me share my screen here. All right. So yeah, as Andrew said, this is an element of EOS, but this isn't EOS. This is a component of it. It's one of the lessons we teach within EOS, but it's a bigger topic than that. It's about accountability. And so this came up because I continually get asked by business owners about how they can bring accountability into their business. When you ask them one of their areas of weaknesses, many of you on this call might have the same thought, is that they struggle with accountability. And frankly, I think we sometimes even struggle to define what that means. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on simplifying accountability, breaking it down into a few key elements that you can work on and manage to bring accountability into your environment. So real quick background again on me. If you've been on this call, you've probably heard this before, but I've been an entrepreneur for almost 30 years. I've started and grown and sold a number of companies. I've been a part of 21 buy, sell, and invest transactions. And really throughout the growth of my businesses, we grew them organically as well as through acquisition. And it's those acquisitions that really led me to EOS. We were looking for a few things ourselves. As we grew quickly, we went from 0 to 50 million in 9 years, and then quickly from there sold into a roll-up and ran that up to 98 million in revenue. And there's a lot of moving parts in a business of that size. It requires a leadership team that's fully effective and running well. And really what we found is that as we were going through the acquisition process, we were looking for two things. One is we wanted businesses that were running well, and we found so few companies that really had a solid structure. And we also found that once we did acquire them, we were struggling ourselves with bringing consistency in our vision and execution and accountability and all the things we're going to talk about today. So we went on a journey to find a way to bring structure to our process, and we found EOS. And so we used an implementer, someone who does what I do now, named Mark Winters out of Dallas. He's the author of Rocket Fuel, and now he runs a business really just working with companies, the visionaries and integrators within companies to make them better at what they do. But we used him as our implementer and implemented EOS into our own business, and we saw the power and the effectiveness of the system. And it really was an eye-opener to me as to the need of having a consistent system that you could use for execution, and it really enabled us to be what we became. So once I retired out of that roll-up business, I continued to do this with other companies. And so I work with businesses not like the ones on this call. Some of you may be my clients, and others I've talked to, and some of you may be working with another implementer or implementing it yourself. This isn't really solely about EOS today, though. We're going to talk about accountability and some tools of that, but we are going to weave in some terms, and I apologize ahead of time, but some terms that are EOS terms, and I'll try to define those as we go. So if you do have questions, though, don't hesitate to submit them on chat. I'd love to hear from you. This is a one-way conversation to a large extent, but think of this as a workshop. So I'm really going to put you on the spot and ask you to be a little introspective and think about your own environment, your own leadership and management skills, and whether or not you're you're doing the things we're going to talk about to the degree that you should. So that's me. Again, today is, well, it's about accountability. It's really about leadership, management, and accountability. And we look at that through an equation we call leadership, or L plus M equals A. So leadership plus management equals accountability. And I'll turn off my video and so you guys can see the full screen here. So leadership plus management equals accountability. And really, when we talk about LMA, we want to make sure that we're clear on leadership and management and what they mean, and the recognition that leadership and management are two different practices. They're not the same. We tend to intermix them too often. And I want to make sure we're clear in our definition of what the difference is between leadership and management. So leadership is really working on the business. It's providing clear direction and a vision to the company, making sure that you're developing the forward path for the organization, that you're clearly communicating that vision, that you're creating openings, that you've got a clear set of roles and responsibilities about the organization that you've defined, that you've created the opportunity for a team to really be their best and step up into the roles that you need them to be in, and that you're thinking about the business. Leadership is really about looking at the future, where we're going, and thinking effectively on how we do what we do and where we're going. Management, on the other hand, is a different practice. It is in the business. It's really about setting clear expectations with your team. It's communicating clearly to the team and effectively. And it's about doing, it's about executing. It's very different than leadership. There really are two sides of the same coin, but they are different in the sense of one is working on the business, leading, the other is working in the business and managing. So we're going to bring more clarity between the distinction between those two and how they relate to accountability. So to start with, and to think of this as a self-assessment. So I'm going to go through some questions that I want you to think again very introspectively about, and I want to make sure that we're being honest with ourselves. And a couple of things will come out of this when we talk through these questions with teams. When I do it in person or virtually with teams, we kind of put them on the spot, and we want to know, how do you feel like you're really doing in these areas? And you'll get two emotions, right? One will be guilt because they're not doing very well in this area, and the other will be that they're a little overly confident in their ability in each of these areas. And the reality is usually somewhere in between. But don't feel either one too much, because frankly, none of us are perfect. We're not executing perfectly, so there's always room for improvement. And frankly, none of us are consistently always living up to these. But these are some specific objectives we want to try to meet as leaders and managers. So am I giving clear direction? This is really yes or no. If you think about your team, everybody that reports to you, that you're interacting with, ask yourself that question. Am I consistently giving clear direction? Am I creating the opening? In other words, am I clear in defining the role that they need, that I've set out for them? Am I creating the opportunity for them to step into it? Whenever we've got an ambiguity, we have a vacuum, it tends to get filled, but usually with the wrong stuff. So we want to make sure we're clear in setting aside the opening. In EOS, we use what we call the accountability chart. We define a role for everybody in the organization. Everyone has a box, and we're very clear in that box what the seat title is and what the functions of that seat are. So we want to make sure that it's not a void that's being filled in, but we're proactively filling that in on what that seat is. And that's true for the whole organization. We want to make sure we're clear in creating that. The second, am I creating a compelling vision? Does the organization know where we're going? Do you know where you're going, right? And we work on this as a team. We'll talk more about the VTO a little bit, but we work on creating a clear vision for the organization of who we are, what we are, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. And we will make sure that the whole organization understands that and there's clarity. And so if you're not able to articulate that consistently and your team doesn't understand it, you're not giving clear direction. So the VTO is the Vision Traction Organizer, and that's the tool we use oftentimes to communicate that vision. So when we set out to create a vision, the old saying, do you see what I'm saying, right? It's about creating that visualization of where we're going and making sure that there's clarity consistently with your team. As you're talking with them, everybody's on the same page. They can all repeat back to you what that vision is, and they're all a part of it, and they've all bought into it. So the second is, am I providing the necessary tools? And that's the resources, the training, the technology, the people, and time and attention. And I mean your time and attention. So if you're not effectively providing these elements, the resources, training, technology, people, time, and attention, you're setting them up for failure. So this is something that you should be thinking about consistently about, are we equipping our organization and our people to do their jobs effectively? And again, if you think of your whole team, it's very binary. Am I doing this consistently for the whole team, or am I not? Thirdly, am I letting go? So when we talk about letting go, this is a deep topic. And really, we look at it from a couple of perspectives. So first off, am I effectively delegating and elevating? So am I releasing the things that need to be done to the team that should be doing them? We oftentimes will go through an exercise and looking at your effective hour impact on the business. So if you look at how much value or the revenue impact of your time on the business, oftentimes it's very large, right? It can be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And if you find that you're doing everyone else's job, you're not being fully effective in the role that you're in. It's not uncommon to find people doing $15 an hour work from a $1,000 an hour position. And so making sure that we're effectively delegating and elevating people to do the roles that we need them to do. Now, the next bullet point there is GWC, and that's gets it once it has the capacity for it. And that's a tool we use to gauge people's ability to step up into the roles that we've assigned them to. So getting it, do they have the God-given ability? Do they have is it in their DNA to do their job? Do they want it? Do they genuinely wake up every day and say, this is the job I want to do? And do they have the capacity for it, the learned ability to do that job? Now, and frankly, if the folks underneath you don't GWC, they're not equipped to take the task that you're giving them, then by all means, don't do that, of course. But you've got to be careful, because if they are equipped to do it and you're not equipping them with the right tools, then obviously it's on you. But if they're not able to do the job, then we probably have a position issue, right? We have a people issue that needs to get resolved. So one thing that we often talk about too is when you do let go, make sure that you are effectively letting go. And there's a book by Ken Blanchard many of you have probably read. It's a continuation of his 1 Minute Manager, but the 1 Minute Manager meets the monkey. And it's just a great illustration of how it often works. And those managers who don't really let go, they can't release what needs to be done, and they allow people to put it back on them. And so it's just this imagery of people coming back to your office and with monkeys on their back, and they walk in, and those monkeys are issues or problems or tasks that they want to effectively dump back on your desk. And so it's this imagery of they leave your office and they leave the monkey behind on your desk, and it creates chaos. And that's an area where truly delegating and elevating and managing to that is critical. So are you letting go? Fourthly, am I acting with a greater good in mind? Now, this is an area that really requires a lot of attention. So first off, the greater good is defined by the VTO, the company vision. The who are we, what are we, where are we going, and how we're going to get there. All right, so the who are we, those core values, making sure that we're really clear on what we're about. What's the soul of the company? What are we committed to? And then what are we is the core focus. What are those things that we do that we are primarily engaged in? What is our business? And make sure we're really clear on that and the plan that's laid out. And are we demonstrating this through our own actions consistently? Are we doing this through our own decisions consistently? Are we walking the talk? And are we putting the company needs first? And so this is a case where we really have to demonstrate to our teams how we expect them to behave. If we're not doing it, it's unrealistic to expect that they're going to be doing it. Now, it's easy as an owner to say, well, of course, I'm putting the greater good in mind, but that's not always the case. If you really think about what we're doing, sometimes we get distracted with our own pursuits and other shiny objects that take us away from that vision that we've laid out for the organization. So making sure that we're representing that and that we're passing that on to our leaders. So a little illustration, by the way, that this isn't EOS. This is something I walk through with a lot of my clients. It really is assessing the folks that are in their team, and it's certainly the leadership team, making sure that the leadership team is made up of people inside that green circle. Those that are putting the company's needs first. They're consistently thinking about the organization before themselves. That's what's required of leaders in your organization. The second ring are those who put the company's needs first some of the time, or about half the time. And the outer ring are really those who are putting themselves in front of the company consistently. And frankly, those are detrimental to your company. You really want to try and purge those out as much as you can, but certainly within your leadership team, you can't afford to have people that are putting their own needs ahead of the company consistently. That creates all kinds of chaos. So looking at your team consistently, making sure that they're living up to that, and for sure that you are. And then fifthly, am I taking clarity breaks? So we've talked about this before in previous sessions, but clarity breaks are really the opportunity to think about what's going on in the business, to think about where you're going to go with the company. It really just spending time thinking, right? You need that opportunity to set time aside to be strategic, because if you're not, you're going to get sucked into the business consistently. You're never going to be able to be strategic and lead. You'll be constantly in management mode. So we want to make sure that we're taking the clarity breaks that we need, right? That we're thinking about how we do what we do, right? That we're creating a consistent cadence. So whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, whatever works for you, but you're setting time aside, put it on your calendar, schedule it, and don't let anything interrupt that time. It's really powerful if you're not doing it. And if you do it consistently, you're going to see the impact not only on your clarity of where you're going to take the business, but you're going to be better at leading the organization. So I strongly recommend that. And if that means just setting an hour aside and getting a yellow notepad and staring at a blank sheet of paper, give yourself that time. And what you'll find is that over time, the ideas will come out. The issues will become more clear. Solutions to problems will become more clear. Action items that have to be taken will become more clear. And you'll understand better and more clearly where you want to take the organization. So again, thinking about these 5 areas, am I consistently a yes in each one of these? And if you're not a yes, what is it going to take to make your no a yes? Am I giving clear direction consistently to our teams? Am I providing the necessary tools to the organization? Am I genuinely letting go and letting my leaders and leadership team own the positions that I've assigned to them? Am I consistently acting with a greater good in mind? And am I taking clarity breaks? If you'll do this consistently, you'll be a better leader. I guarantee it. So the next part of LMA is about management. And as we said, leadership is all about working on the business, giving clear direction, creating the opening, and thinking about where you're going, developing that vision and communicating that. Management is really in the business, setting expectations with your team, clearly communicating with the team, and coming alongside and shoulder to shoulder executing in the business. So when we talk about accountability, oftentimes people ask, well, how do I hold my people accountable? And frankly, there is no magic formula to accountability itself, aside from being a solid leader and manager. If you're consistently leading, you're consistently managing, accountability is a byproduct of those two disciplines. So I like this quote from Jim Collins: the moment you feel like you have to manage somebody, you've made a hiring mistake. So when we talk about management, certainly in EOS, we're not talking about micromanaging people, doing their tasks for them, or cracking the whip. It's about equipping them, making sure that we have the right team, and helping them be the best that they can be in the position they're in. So the first step is, am I setting clear expectations? And this is a challenge that I find most managers have. They have expectations that are unspoken and in their head, but they don't often get communicated to their team. So setting clear expectations. What are my clear expectations of you? And then flip side, what are your clear expectations of me? And you'll be surprised if you'll open that door, what your team will tell you, what they're expecting of you, and they'll let you know, right? Assuming you've created the culture where you value their feedback, you're gonna get good feedback from them when you ask them what their expectations are. So setting that up, and so we have clear communication and clear expectations communicated. And those expectations really break down into these areas, right? So what are the roles that I've assigned to you? What do I expect you to do in the business? What are you being held accountable to? What are our core values? So if I expect you to live through our core values, what are they? And how are you matching to those? Are our core values developed in a way that I can consistently communicate to them to you, that you understand them, that I can gauge you? Is this something measurable to say, yes, you are, or you're not living up to these core values? The next is rocks. If you remember from last time talking about EOS, rocks are those 90-day objectives. We set up this 90-day management world where we set objectives for you for each of the team members, right? Each 90 days to accomplish, and then measurables. What are we measuring? So that you're clear in my expectations of what is going to get measured, what am I paying attention to, and what are the specific goals or targets of those measurables. It's not enough just to say, well, I think we need more. Well, more of what, and what is more, right? So be clear in your communication with your teams. So am I setting clear expectations? Yes or no? Secondly, am I communicating well with them? So again, it's a two-way street. So when you talk about communication, unlike this call, it's not a one-way conversation. Every time it is getting feedback, listening to them, making sure that you're clear on what's going on in their world. You'll find that too often we make assumptions that they understand, assumptions of what they meant, assumptions of what they're feeling or what's going on. And I would just ask you to make sure there are no assumptions. Be bold and just simply ask, what's on your mind? If somebody gives you a strange look in a meeting, too often we can brush that off. We don't really want to enter that what we call the danger zone. We don't want to push into those areas that might be a little messy, right? But without pushing into them, you're going to make assumptions, you're going to make mistakes, and eventually it's not going to end well. So being really clear on exactly what's on each other's mind, just simply ask. And it's sometimes not easy. Some people are better at this than others, but it doesn't matter if you're a nurturing type of manager or if you're a drill sergeant. These tools work, and just simply asking what's going on and making sure that they know there's a safe place to be able to respond effectively and give you what really is going on in their world. If that's not working for you, oftentimes you'll find you'll be in a tough discussion, and you could tell there's issues. And there's a tool within EOS we use called 2 emotions. And it's really just simply asking, okay, I feel like we're struggling here, and let's share 2 emotions, one bad, one good. I'll go first and you go second. What's going on? And I just want to know, what are you feeling right now? And what they'll do is it will reveal to you more about the dynamics of this conversation. You'll be surprised what comes out of that, and how it will break down some walls to have more effective discussions. The next is making sure that your question to statement ratio is much higher questions and much lower statements. I would suggest you try to keep it at least 2/3 or more questions in any conversation you have with your direct reports. Number one, it shows that you respect them. It's not, I'm just dictating to you, but it also is, I value your opinion and I want to know what's going on in your world. The second is that you'll be surprised at what you'll learn from them, right? Obviously, we've got these great, high-powered, smart people working for us. Let's make sure that we're extracting as much of that value from them, the wisdom that we can get from the team. So it's not just a one-way conversation. So am I effectively asking more questions than statements that are being made? And then lastly, a tool we just call echoing, and the idea of echoing is obvious, right? So if I've said something to you, we're having a discussion, and I make a statement to you, or something I need you to do, or a decision that has to be made, I'll often ask, can you repeat back to me what you heard from me, just so we'll make sure we're on the same page. And in turn, I'll do the same. Well, let me tell you what I heard you say, right? And that is an effective tool to make sure you're not missing each other, that you're on the same page, that you're speaking the same language, and you leave that conversation with absolute clarity on what was actually said. So if you'll use some of these tools to make sure that you're not just communicating doesn't mean the frequency in which I talk to you. It's about how well are we understanding each other? Are we actually communicating to each other? So yes or no, am I communicating well with my team? The third piece is making sure that I've got the right meeting pulse. And meeting pulse is the frequency of dialogue exchange. And so the meeting pulse is really about how often are you meeting with your team? Do you have the right cadence? Are you reporting measurables, right? So are you, when you do meet with the team, do we have data that we're working on together? Are they meaningful conversations and information exchanges? And making sure that we're keeping the circles connected. So an illustration with that, too often you'll see within companies, there are people and teams where the circles never intersect. They're working too independently, and that creates problems. You're going to see things come off the rails eventually if the circles are not connecting. I see this with a lot of companies where we have somebody on the leadership team who's competent and we're confident in their ability, but we give them too much leeway. We're not consistently connecting and communicating, and so they'll take us in a direction we weren't anticipating. On the flip side, you'll see some companies where the teams are way too connected, and it's nothing can happen without a committee approach to everything, and that's not effective. It's not efficient, and frankly, some of the worst decisions come out of this decision by committee situations. We don't want to create that atmosphere. We want to create an atmosphere, ideally, where we have the right amount of connection between the circles, and that typically EOS has a method in which we are weekly meeting as a leadership team. We spend 90 minutes together with a very clearly set agenda. That agenda takes us through checking in on the business and then working on issues together for 60 minutes. And then once a quarter, we get back together and we look at where we were for the quarter, where we are now, where we're going for the next quarter, and we get back in it and go. That's usually enough. That's usually enough to keep the circles connected with your teams. But if you do find that you need more frequent connection, that's okay. Find the pace that works for you, but you don't want to overconnect, and you certainly don't want to underconnect either. So are you consistently having the right meeting pulse? Are you meeting with your leadership team at the right pace, with the right agenda, so you're effectively communicating and getting the information that needs to be shared? Fourthly, am I having quarterly conversations with my team members? So this is not unlike the meeting pulse. You want to make sure you have the right cadence of meeting with your team members. Having quarterly conversations, make sure that you have micro corrections along the way. So the illustration often will give, if I don't have a slide here, but I'll draw this out oftentimes. If you imagine a graph, and as you work towards from the beginning of the year towards the end of the year, if you get off track, you end up with diverging lines pretty drastically. And so if you're only having a conversation once a year with your team members and having an annual review, the correction has to be pretty massive to get those two lines back together again. It's unrealistic to say, well, I remember back in February when you did these things, or what really happens is you don't really remember what happened, and you just have a nice conversation that doesn't really have any meat to it. And so what I'm suggesting to you instead is have a quarterly conversation. This needs to be somewhat casual. Do it off-site. If you are meeting in your offices, then I suggest that you go to lunch or go have coffee or meet somewhere else where you can have a one-on-one conversation, fairly casual, and make sure that the agenda is consistent. So we have a tool that we call 555 in EOS, and it's a way of doing that quarterly evaluation. Again, if you do quarterly evaluations, you end up with micro corrections, not massive corrections to issues. So within 555, it really is the idea of reviewing your 5 core values. And by the way, you may have 3, you may have 7, you may have other numbers. 555 is kind of catchy and easy to remember, so don't get hung up on the numbers. But core values, making sure that we are consistently reviewing quarterly your core values. Are you consistently living up to the core values that we've set? If not, what do we need to do to get you back on track in those areas? We need to review your roles, right? So the role that we've defined for you, are you consistently executing in those roles? How'd you do this last quarter, living up to these 5 things or these 3 or 7 things that we've laid out within your role? And then lastly, rocks. Rocks, remember, are those 90-day objectives. So did you get these 90-day objectives complete? Are they done or not done? So if we've laid out an objective for you, did it get done? And so, and once you've done that, by the way, it's also an opportunity to set the next quarter's objectives with this individual. So a few things will come from this. One is they're going to feel more connected to you. You're going to hear better feedback from them. It's going to be a great conversation about how are things going. They're going to know from you your expectations of them, right? They know consistently each quarter. You're going to ask them, and you're going to review your core values. How are you doing in your core values? How are you doing in a role that we've laid out for you? Are you meeting the objectives I've set for you? So you're setting clear expectations, and you're consistently checking in with them, and they're going to give you great feedback on what's going on in the organization. So you'll have better clarity as well. So I highly recommend, if you're not doing a 555 session with your team members, that you consider doing that. So if you do find that you've got a challenge with individuals, we use a tool called the People Analyzer. And the People Analyzer is just simply a matrix that we go through and say, okay, are you living up to each of these core values? Most of the time, some of the times, or rarely. And again, it's just a way to gauge, are you on track with what we need of you and your core values? And then the GWC, if you remember again, that's, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity for it? It's an opportunity for you to re-ask those questions and give them feedback in those areas. Do you get it? I think you do. You're living up in that area of the role. Your capacity is where we need it, but I'm starting to wonder whether or not you really want this position. I know it's a lot. It's a big position. Do you really want it? Absolutely, I want it. Great. That's what I want to hear. Let's get back in it and go do it again. But if you're consistently asking that, you're going to get ahead of issues before they become big issues. So am I having quarterly conversations with my team members? And then fifthly, and lastly, in the management practice area is, am I rewarding and recognizing effectively with my team? So I highly recommend that you give positive and negative feedback quickly, within 24 hours. The highest impact is going to be when someone has done something really positive, and you give feedback to the team, and really publicly is my recommendation on on anything positive that you want to give them. So it's an opportunity to give them the pat on the back, or in the negative case, the kick in the rear that they need to get back on track. So if you do it quickly within 24 hours, you take advantage of the momentum, they recognize that you recognize what they're doing right or wrong, and make these micro corrections where needed and promote where needed very quickly. And the old adage, criticize in private and praise in public. This is really, really important. And sometimes people have to break themselves of the habit of criticizing or correcting people in a team setting. And it's really can be very damaging to the relationship with that team member and their position within that team. So I suggest you do that in private, but always praise in public. It's a very powerful tool to reward somebody publicly, because not only does it build up their esteem and value to the company, but it also helps the other team members recognize what you value, right? So if you're consistently recognizing a team member for what they're doing, others are going to want to replicate that. Now, the only danger here is if you're not consistent in your recognition, you don't want to overlook team members that are effectively doing the same positive things. You want to make sure you're even in your praise in public. Make sure you're the boss, right? This is a business, and there's a lot going on in your business. It exists for a lot of reasons, but probably not to build up a set of friends. There's nothing wrong with being friendly with your team, but you are their boss. And so it's important to be their boss, not their buddy, so that you are effectively correcting. They understand there's expectations being set, and you're being fair, not only to them, but the whole team, by addressing and correcting and managing people correctly. And then lastly, the 3-strike rule. So the 3-strike rule is just the idea that when there is an issue, that you're addressing it head on, that you do it in private, and this is a case because it's more of an HR issue, that you want to make sure you're clear on the rules in your given area, your state, from an HR standpoint. But the 3-strike rule is just simply making sure that you are consistent in the way you handle addressing issues with your staff. So the way this typically works, it's done in private, and I suggest that you bring 3 examples of the issue to the table. And again, this is also where we go back to what we talked about. We're measuring on the core values, on your role, on your objectives, the measurables. They know what you're expecting of them. And so you can bring this issue to them and say, here's 3 examples where you've fallen short in this. And the reason for 3 is because if you give 1, it's easy for them to just say, well, that's just an exception, that they have an excuse for it. You bring 2, they can justify themselves potentially, but 3 is really, you got 3 examples. It's hard to debate that. So bring 3 examples of where they're falling short. Give a game plan on this is what I expect of you. Let's talk about how to get you back on track. And 30 days later, do it again. So that's the 1st strike meeting. The 2nd strike meeting is 30 days later, and you basically have the exact same meeting where you sit down with them and say, go through the issues and say, are we going to address this? How are we going to address that? Or if it is addressed, recognize it's addressed and move on. If it doesn't get addressed, the final 3rd strike meeting is the pink slip meeting. So it's a set cadence. They know what to expect. And frankly, most of the time, you don't have to let people go. By the 3rd strike meeting, if they're not meeting expectations, they know they're not meeting expectations. More often than not, they'll leave. So frankly, if you're doing this right, you'll rarely actually fire people. They'll leave before that happens, because they know they're not meeting your expectations, and they know what's coming. So the 3-strike rule, am I rewarding and recognizing consistently? Yes or no? And again, this applies to everyone you manage. Is it always yes, or is it sometimes no? If it's sometimes no, it's no. And be thinking about what you need to do to make your no a yes. So again, am I making my expectations clear? Yes or no? Am I communicating well with my team? Yes or no? Do I have the right meeting pulse with my team? Yes or no? Do I have the right quarterly conversations with my team members? Yes or no? And am I rewarding and recognizing effectively? Yes or no? And consistently. So that's what it means to be a great manager. Frankly, there are a million books out there with thousands of great ideas on what you can do in managing people, but frankly, it all really boils down to just a few simple, consistent practices that you can follow by setting expectations, communicating effectively, meeting with them on a regular basis, having the right conversations with them on a quarterly basis to correct, and rewarding and recognizing effectively. If you'll do those things, you're going to be a rock star manager, and it will move things forward in a big way. So again, are you a great leader and manager? We all have room for improvement. I suggest that if you go through this, and we'll send this with the follow-up, these questions broken down in 2 sheets, so you can look at yourself as a leader and look at yourself as a manager, and do the same with your managers in your own organization. Talk to them about what it means to be an effective manager, and as a manager of the managers, all the things we talked about, apply that to your managers and see, are they effectively doing the same with their teams? So 2 commitments I would ask of you. One is commit to converting all of your no's to yeses. It's challenging. I suggest that you be open and honest with yourself and look to see, are you effectively doing the things we talked about? If not, what is it going to take to make your no a yes? Secondly, ask your team member how you're doing in these practices. That's a tough one. Sitting down with them and asking that question, how am I doing? Go through these questions, step through them, and ask them for their honest feedback. You might think you're a yes, but they may reveal that, no, you're not. I don't have these things from you, or I'm not getting this consistently from you, or I'm not clear on what your expectations are. And it's an opportunity for you to get on the same page and effectively get everyone back on track. If you'll do this consistently, you'll be a great leader. You'll be working on the business. You'll be giving clear direction. You'll be creating openings. You'll be thinking about the business. You'll be managing effectively by working in the business, setting expectations, communicating well, and working with them side by side, effectively doing and executing. If you're doing that consistently, you'll have accountability in your organization. That's the natural byproduct of doing these things. So that's the presentation I had. And Andrew, I don't know if we had any questions that came up in the meantime. If you do have questions, we'd love to hear from you for sure.
We don't yet, but I'd love to open it up, and I can share the allow you to talk and open up your mics if you'd like to chime in. Just raise your hand. In the meantime, I know this was supposed to be more of a workshop, so if you don't have questions, that's fine. But if you do, feel free to let us know now.
For sure. I'll leave this out there also. We are going to send these bullet points. If you want to talk about any of these, I'm more than happy to jump on a call with you and just talk through what that would look like for you to grow in each of these areas. If you want to talk about how to bring this to your management team as well and kind of go through the same exercise with them, I'd be happy to help you out in that way.
I think James had a question. I'm going to let him chime in if he'd like to. And then Salim also asked, Jason, you don't have your phone number on here. You want to share it with everyone?
I will. Yep. So my phone number is 832-928-1075. And I'll put this in the answer as well.
Perfect. And then James, your mic should be ready to go if you'd like to shoot over your question.
My name is James. I'm with Oxy Pet Mobile River Oaks in Houston, Texas. I did have a question. I'm a fairly new business, and we're growing. And the issue is one of the employees who were around when we first opened is still around, and they're phenomenal. They're a great employee. The issue I'm running into is when you're very, very small, you kind of get into like a buddy relationship, and I'm trying to find a way to tactfully come out of this relationship, be more professional as we grow, because I just feel like it's going to create a problem in the long term.
It will, especially if this person isn't going to continue to be a partner level or a top level leader, it can become even more of an issue, right? Because you'll end up with mid-level and lower level workers that have a different relationship with you than the rest of the team, and can create different dynamics for sure. So one thing I would do is be absolutely clear in setting expectations. If you go back to what we had talked about on the leadership side, management side, excuse me, setting clear expectations, making sure that you're addressing issues with them effectively. I think what you're going to find is that you will be able to have tougher conversations with this person as needed. So it's not that you can't be friendly with them, but you can't let that get in the way of them executing effectively. Make sure you're clearly setting expectations and managing to that.
Okay, I got it. So you're just pretty much saying just slowly transition back out of that role now that I've grown. Is that what you're saying?
It is. So start managing that, right? So again, doing these things that we just talked about, making sure you're effectively setting those expectations, defining boundaries, so that he understands or she understands what you need of them. And if they're falling short, you're managing them just like you would anybody else. Again, it depends on the dynamics, and we can talk more about that. But I would say start now versus trying to deal with that further down the road, right? So nothing wrong with having a friendly relationship with them, but the expectations and the management side of it has to be there, irrespective of your relationship with them.
All right, thank you.
But,
Liam, did you have another question? I saw your hand was still up, or did you just want the phone number?
No, not really.
Okay.
Thanks.
Lee, did you want
Thanks.
to ask yours on the mic, or?
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I did send it via a textual question, but I can go ahead and ask it verbally if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
go for it. So everybody hears it.
So one thing that, and I've implemented EOS into our business. It's been extremely helpful, and we've completed the vision traction organizer. But here's one thing I have a question about regarding revenue and profit goals and clarity around displaying and tracking those. So we have revenue and profit goals in the VTO, which includes quarterly, 1-year plan, and a 3-year plan for those numbers. But have you used data plots to display and track planned versus actual revenue and profit for each of those time segments, like on a quarterly basis, an annual basis, and even go so far as to take this and display it onto a 3-year plan to show how you're tracking your revenue and profit numbers versus what you planned for those time segments, and display those to your team? Have you done that in that kind of detail to show?
Yeah, you bet. And appreciate the question there, Lee. So I definitely have clients that will do that. Some clients don't want all that detail shared with their full team, and that's okay too. But if you're comfortable sharing that information, it is helpful for them to see the big picture of where we're tracking. It also helps for them to understand that if you're not on track, that we're not on track, and we're all working hard to get back on track. So plotting that is helpful. By the way, also on the weekly level 10 meetings with the scorecards, we're looking at measurables on a weekly basis. And
Right.
so every week, it's typically a 13-week rolling window, but I've got clients that do it for forever. And within that, not only do we see the trends, but we also defined our baseline and our goal. So the baseline, I like to just say it's the keep the lights on number. And the goal is where do we really want to be? And so you'll understand each number in relation to those. And that I find is really helpful for the team also, is if they're consistently not matching the baseline, we're not hitting or keep the lights on number, then we all understand that we've got to make some big changes to get back in line. And so it's not just you telling them, but they can see firsthand what the challenges are.
I want to chime in on that real quick too. Jason, you mentioned this last week or during your last presentation about this is from a valuation perspective, and Al might want to weigh in on this too. But there are private equity groups out there that will literally only search for EOS companies that have implemented EOS in their system. So around the revenue guidance and tracking, I think that's super important, not just for your operations and increasing your top line, but I think if you can show how you're managing these controls
Right.
from a transparency perspective,
Yeah.
it's not just, hey, we grew our top line. This is how we did it. This is how we tracked it. We actually exceeded what we were, initially budgeting at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year. That's really important. And I don't think enough companies do that because, sometimes which is great. It's just a push to let's increase sales year over year over year. But I think if you have more granularity around how you did that, how you tracked it and managed it, you can kind of pinpoint what worked and what didn't work.
Well, and
and those are tools for the buyer.
it demonstrates discipline and ability to execute. And that's the thing. Numbers are great, but if I can show you that we hit the numbers that we intended to hit, boy, that's so much more powerful. Just look at public companies. They have the same thing when revenue guidance, right? We're kind of doing the same thing in a private world. And Lee knows this. We set some longer term objectives for his company as well, and is really with all my clients, intentional about going after them. Sometimes it means you have to change some of the ways you do business, but we try to keep those goals out there so we can show that we're effective in making the changes we need to make to hit the goals. And so the old adage we always talk about, you could shoot for the stars and hit the moon and be happy that you hit the moon, but we're really more about aiming for the moon and hitting the moon, right? So we want to hit the target that we set out for and be very clear on what we're trying to accomplish. And so again, Andrew, to your point, that's one of the reasons that a lot of these private equity groups do like U.S. companies, is because they show the discipline, the intentionality, the vision, and the execution of what they're trying to do. And you can go back historically and say, yeah, we've actually achieved these things we said we're going to do.
Yeah, okay. You're not just throwing noodles and seeing if they stick. It's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Good.
No, that's helpful. I appreciate all that.
Andrew, just to add one thing on that too, it's not just if you go to exit the company, but if you go to look for a loan and you go to a banker, they're going to always ask you, what's your projections? What are you looking at? If you can go back and say, hey, look, for the last 5 years, we projected this and we hit this, or it gives a lot of credibility to it.
That's true. That's true. It's a good record keeper.
Great record keeper.
Last thing I'll add to that is, if you are going to exit your company, we set a 10-year target, let's say to be 30 million by year 30, and you want to exit in year 5, if you can show consistent execution that you're on the trajectory to hit that goal, that vision is going to be sold to the new buyer, and it will equate to higher value in the long run.
Absolutely.
Execution.
And honestly, I don't know what better way to communicate this than a simple data plot that shows plan versus action. I just don't know of a better way to show it.
Well, I agree. I think plan versus actual is helpful, but along with the numbers say one thing, but understanding how we got there. And so the quarterly and annual objectives that we set will demonstrate that you're executing on the things, not just the numbers. So it wasn't just happenstance that the market, rose and we rose up with it, but we were doing these things consistently to execute to get there. So we can show both of those two things.
Yeah. I guess.
Can I say something? I think, even with EOS and accounting, we're talking about having a really good system of internal control. You're talking about having accountability, and then that also substantiates sustainability. So I think all this goes hand in hand with what's being reported financially and what's projected and meeting your projections.
Right. I agree. It's really about intentionality and just calling it out and doing it. And really, when we talked about leadership and management, by the way, this is taking everything we just said down to your teams, right? So you're setting those expectations, you're hitting goals, you're consistently executing, not just at the top line with your top line numbers, but you can demonstrate how you're doing that all the way down the chain. And that's how you're going to achieve a really great company that has effectiveness of accountability, of execution, and talk about value at that point. If the whole organization is executing with excellence, it's a lot easier to sell that company than it is if it's all dependent on you or luck. So good. All right. Well, appreciate the questions. I think we're at the top of the hour. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to get on a call with you and talk through any of this further. And certainly with Exit Advisors, if you're curious about what the process looks like and you want to understand more about really how to build your company to the point of a successful exit, contact Andrew and the team. He definitely can give you the right guidance to help you understand what that process looks like.
Yeah, please do. It's, 15, 20 minutes. It costs you nothing. You have only, things to gain from that. Jason, one more time. Will you actually just put your phone number in the chat? I think a few people.
I did. I threw it in chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, give us a call, reach out to us. No harm in doing that. And it's better to start this process now and start thinking about it. So last point, look for us next week. We continue to do these every Wednesday at noon. Next week, we have another business partner of ours, Aaron Ball. He's an attorney here in Houston, focuses around business and M&A transactions. He's going to be going over a topic, Phoenix or fire sale, buying distressed businesses. So if you want to explore that sounds like a really interesting topic, and he'll be on next week. So keep a looking for the invite, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.